Kay Amin moved through the opulent halls of the State House like a ghost in a gilded cage. It was 1974, and her husband Idi Amin, the self-proclaimed conqueror of the British Empire and president for life, ruled with an iron fist wrapped in erratic charm. To the world, he was a larger-than-life figure, boisterous, unpredictable, a man who fed his enemies to crocodiles and paraded in military uniforms bedecked with medals he awarded himself. But to Kay, he was a storm cloud that darkened every corner of her life. Kay had been just 18 when she married Amin in 1966, drawn into his orbit by his commanding presence and promises of a life beyond the rural simplicity of her Arua upbringing. She was his second wife, one of several in a polygamous arrangement that mirrored the traditions of his Kakwa heritage. At first, their union burned with passion. Amin, with his towering frame and booming laugh, would sweep her into his arms, whispering tales of his boxing days and military conquests. Their nights were filled with the rhythm of Ugandan drums echoing from distant villages and the soft glow of lanterns in their private quarters. Kay bore him 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter, each arrival celebrated with feasts that lasted for days. But as Amin's power grew after his 1971 coup against Milton Obote, so did his paranoia and cruelty. The man who once made her laugh now terrified her with sudden rages, accusations of disloyalty, and the disappearances of those who crossed him. By early 1974, the cracks in their marriage had widened into chasms. Amin's attention wandered to newer wives and mistresses, leaving Kay isolated in the sprawling presidential residence. She spent her days tending to the children: Faisal, aged 8, Moses, 6, Mwanga, 4, and little Haji, barely 2, reading them stories from dog-eared books smuggled in from abroad, or gazing out at Lake Victoria, dreaming of freedom. The palace walls, adorned with gold-framed portraits of Amin in various heroic poses, felt like prison bars. Whispers among the staff spoke of Amin's secret police, the State Research Bureau, who vanished people in the dead of night. Kay knew better than to complain. One wrong word could seal her fate. It was in this suffocating atmosphere that Kay met Dr. Peter Mbalamukasa. He was a soft-spoken surgeon at Malago Hospital, Uganda's premier medical facility, where Amin often sent his family for checkups. Peter was everything Amin was not: gentle, intellectual, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Their first encounter was routine, a checkup for little Haji's fever, but Peter's steady hands and reassuring voice lingered in Kay's mind long after. "Your son will be fine, Madam Amin," he had said, his fingers brushing hers as he handed back the prescription. In that touch, a spark ignited. What began as innocent visits escalated into stolen moments. Peter, risking everything, would meet Kay in the hospital's quiet gardens, under the guise of medical consultations. Their conversations flowed like the Nile, deep and unstoppable. He spoke of literature, of Hemingway and Achebe, books banned under Amin's regime for their subversive ideas. Kay confided in him about her loneliness, the fear that gripped her heart each time Amin returned from his trips abroad, reeking of scotch and foreign perfumes. "He sees enemies everywhere," she whispered one afternoon, as they sat beneath a flame tree, its scarlet blossoms falling like blood drops. "Even in me." Peter listened, his heart aching for this beautiful woman trapped in a tyrant's shadow. He was married, too, but his own life paled in comparison to the drama of hers. Soon, their talks turned intimate. In a hidden alcove of the hospital, away from prying eyes, they shared their first kiss, a desperate, forbidden embrace that tasted of rebellion. Kay's body, long neglected, responded with a hunger she hadn't known she possessed. Peter's touch was tender, exploring her curves with reverence. Unlike Amin's possessive grip, they made love in hurried secrecy, in his office after hours, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a warning. Each encounter was a rush of adrenaline and ecstasy. Kay's moans muffled against his shoulder as they clung to each other, bodies slick with sweat in the tropical humidity. But passion bred carelessness. By mid-1974, Kay discovered she was pregnant. The joy she should have felt twisted into terror. Amin had publicly divorced her, along with 2 other wives, in a bizarre radio broadcast in March, declaring them unfaithful and unfit. Though he still kept her under his roof for the children's sake, the divorce was a humiliating spectacle, broadcast nationwide. "I have divorced these women because they have failed me." Amin's voice had boomed over the airwaves, his Scottish accent, picked up from British colonial officers, adding an odd lilt to his fury. Kay knew the child wasn't Amin's. Their intimacy had ceased months ago. If he found out, her life and Peter's would end in agony. Desperation drove them to a fateful decision. Peter, with his medical expertise, agreed to perform an abortion in secret. It was a risk beyond measure. Abortion was illegal and discovery meant death. But what choice did they have? On a stormy August night, Kay slipped out of the State House, feigning a headache to the guards. She met Peter at his clinic, a small room tucked away in the labyrinthine corridors of Malago. The rain pounded the tin roof like gunfire as he prepared the instruments, his hands trembling for the first time in his career. "I love you," Kay whispered, lying on the cold table, her dress hiked up, exposing her vulnerability. Peter's eyes met hers, filled with a mix of love and dread. "We'll be free after this," he promised, though neither believed it. The procedure began smoothly, but complications arose. Kay hemorrhaged badly, her blood soaking the sheets. Peter's attempts to staunch the flow were unsuccessful. The clinic lacked the necessary equipment for such an emergency. Panic set in as Kay's cries weakened to whimpers. "Peter, the children," she gasped, her vision blurring. In his frenzy, Peter tried everything, clamping arteries, injecting adrenaline, but it was too late. Kay's body went limp, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Horror consumed Peter. Alone with her corpse, he knew Amin's wrath would be biblical. In a haze of grief and fear, he made a gruesome choice: to dismember the body, hoping to dispose of it piecemeal and flee. With surgical precision, he severed limbs, placing them in plastic bags and boxes, his tears mixing with the blood on the floor. The act was mechanical, detached, as if he were operating on a stranger. But each cut was a wound to his soul. He loaded the remains into the trunk of his car, parked outside the hospital, intending to drive to the Nile and let the waters claim her. Before he could escape, guilt overwhelmed him. Swallowing a vial of poison from his supplies, Peter slumped against the steering wheel, his life ebbing away as the storm raged on. Dawn broke over Kampala like a reluctant witness, the sun piercing the haze left by the night's downpour. The discovery of Peter's car outside Malago Hospital sent shockwaves through the city. A janitor, arriving for his shift, noticed the trunk ajar and the metallic tang of blood wafting out. Peering inside, he recoiled at the sight. Dismembered limbs, pale and lifeless, wrapped in stained linens. The police were called, and soon the State Research Bureau descended like vultures. Idi Amin was informed mid-morning, as he lounged in his office, devouring a breakfast of roasted goat and matoke, surrounded by sycophantic aides. "What is this?" he bellowed, his face contorting from joviality to rage in an instant. The messenger, a trembling captain, relayed the details. The body was identified as Kay's, found in Dr. Mbalamukasa's vehicle, alongside the doctor's own poisoned corpse. Evidence of an affair and a botched abortion littered the scene. Medical tools, love letters hidden in Peter's pockets. Amin's reaction was volcanic. He smashed a vase against the wall, shards flying like shrapnel. "That whore," he roared, his voice echoing through the halls. But beneath the fury simmered a twisted grief. Kay had been his once, a symbol of his virility and conquest. Her betrayal struck at his core, fueling the paranoia that already plagued him. Whispers of political enemies framing him flickered in his mind, but rage drowned them out. He ordered the remains brought to the hospital mortuary under heavy guard. At Malago, under Amin's direct supervision, the body was reassembled. Pathologists, quaking in fear, stitched the limbs back together on a steel table, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows. In a macabre flourish, some say ordered by Amin himself, the arms and legs were reversed, right arm where the left should be and vice versa. It was a deliberate desecration, a final humiliation to brand her as twisted in death as she had been in life. Amin stood over the procedure, his massive frame casting a long shadow, muttering curses in Luganda and English. "She thought she could betray me? Me, the King of Scotland?" he growled, referencing one of his self-bestowed titles. But the tyrant's cruelty didn't end there. Obsessed with teaching a lesson, Amin summoned his children. Faisal, Moses, Mwanga, and Haji were bundled into a black Mercedes and driven to the mortuary, oblivious to the horror awaiting them. The air inside was thick with formaldehyde and decay, a stench that would haunt their dreams for years. Amin, his eyes wild with a mix of sorrow and madness, gathered them around the slab where Kay's mutilated form lay, covered by a thin sheet except for the grotesque display. "Look at your mother," he commanded, yanking back the cloth. The children froze, their young minds struggling to comprehend. Faisal, the eldest, let out a piercing scream, collapsing to his knees. Moses clung to his father's leg, sobbing uncontrollably. Mwanga stared in wide-eyed silence, while little Haji wailed, reaching out as if to wake her. The reversed limbs made the body look like a broken doll, stitches jagged like lightning scars. Amin, unmoved by their terror, launched into a tirade. "Your mother was a bad woman, who lay with another man," he shouted, his spittle flying. "She killed herself in shame, and this is what happens to betrayers. Remember this, loyalty to me or end like her." He forced them to touch the cold flesh, to stare into her vacant eyes, imprinting the image forever. The lesson was meant to harden them, to mold them into extensions of his iron will, but it shattered their innocence instead. Word of the incident spread like wildfire. Amin, ever the showman, allegedly broadcast images of the reassembled body on state television that evening. A grainy, censored feed showing the outline under the sheet, with his voiceover warning the nation, "This is the fate of those who defy authority." International headlines screamed of his barbarity, adding to the litany of atrocities. The expulsion of Asians, the massacres of Akoli and Lango tribes, and the rumored cannibalism. Yet Amin denied direct involvement, claiming in interviews that Kay had been murdered by imperialist agents to discredit him. His son Hussein, years later, would echo this, insisting on a conspiracy by political foes. In the aftermath, the children were scarred souls. Faisal withdrew into silence. Moses developed nightmares that woke the palace staff. Mwanga became prone to fits of anger mirroring his father's, and Haji clung to nannies, fearing abandonment. Amin's regime, already teetering, grew more unstable, his paranoia deepening. He remarried quickly, but the ghost of Kay lingered, a reminder of vulnerability in a man who craved invincibility. In the end, it wasn't just her body that was sliced apart. It was the fabric of a family, a nation, torn by one man's unchecked power.